Welcome to today's episode of Expert Showcase. Today on the show we have Kylee Ellis, and she's going to be talking to you, teaching you, and showing you all about how to automate your marketing by publishing a book to generate prepaid clients. Hey Kylee, how you doing today?
Good, thanks, Chris. Excited to be here.
Epic. Well, we are so looking forward to having you on today because, let's face it, everyone wants to automate and everyone wants to generate prepaid clients because I can't think of anything better to have than just have a boatload of clients that are prepaid coming in and you know where your income is coming from, and it's got to be much easier. But I'm sure we'll get to all that in the second part of the show. For those of you who are new to the show, we split the show up into two parts. First part, we talk about our epic guest hero's journey. The second part, we focus on their area of expertise. So today we're going to be talking to Kylee Ellis, and we're going to hear all about her heroine's journey. And Kylee, why don't you start us off and give us a brief overview of your heroine's journey?
Sure. Well, as with all good journeys, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. I like to think there's not an end and it's just the start of the next journey. But I actually the problem with how I started is I started young. I started at the point in time when I was actually working for someone else and they tried to fire me. And you know, young people, you've got a bit of a big head. What do you mean you're firing me? You can't fire me, I quit. So, unemployed for a moment and not wanting to be unemployed, I decided to open a business the very next day. So there was that much thought put into it, to be perfectly honest with you. Of course, the reason they tried to fire me, having never been fired before in my life, was because they actually said they believed I could run their business better than they could, and I was formerly trained as a graphic designer. And they said, well, anyone can do graphic design, but only you can run our company. But they knew I didn't want to be unemployed, so they had to fire me as the graphic designer before they thought I would accept the administration job. Well, you already heard what I said to that, but I thought, hold on, if they think I can run their business, I'm running mine. And I literally opened the next day. The problem is I opened a business with not much planning and no finance behind it. So the first thing I did was go to the bank to try and get a loan. But a young person who doesn't own property and has no assets to put behind them, of course, the bank laughed at me. Around the same time, within that first year of starting the business off, and by the way, it started off very successfully, except for there was no finance behind it, GFC hit. So now the banks really didn't want to give me a loan. So it was all a very, very interesting time period. But what I did was I literally built a business from nothing and with a knowledge base of my skills and experience, but actually learning as you go. And that's part of my journey. For example, I told you I'm trained as a graphic designer. So when I opened my graphic design studio, and my first customer came to me and said, can you design my book? I went, sure, I'm a graphic designer. I can design your book, no problem. Then it was like, can you sell my book? Sell it online? I can build websites. I'm a graphic designer. Sure, we can do that. Then it was, can you print my book? How hard can it be to become a print broker? Sure, I'll work out how to do that. Then it was, can you distribute my book all over the world in bookstores and get me international credibility? Not a problem. And as you can see, I was a very quick learner. But to be perfectly honest with you, my first 12 customers were all books. I thought I was a graphic designer, and from that first book, it was like, oh, can you do my series? And so on and so forth. Some of those questions were asked by different people, but in a range of about, well, not very long, 6 to 12 months, 95% of the work in my graphic design studio was in publishing. So this was the turning point of my journey. I was seeing the results I was getting for my customers, and I was getting one of two things. There was no grey. I was either bringing them in a six-figure income from book sales alone, so they were reordering large volumes multiple times a year, because back then it was printing offshore to get low print prices and bringing them in through customs, or they were getting absolutely no results at all, as in they were literally printing boxes and boxes of unopened books and not selling one and wondering why. I looked at the key difference between the two customers. The ones that were extremely successful were marketing their book, and the ones that had absolutely no result had done jack all since the beautiful books arrived successfully published and wondered what they did wrong. So that was a huge turning point for me. I was like, I can see what's working, I can see what's not working, but it's not working for me. I was coming to the office at 5 o'clock when my staff went home and leaving at 9 in the morning trying to keep this business running and growing. By that stage, I had about 12 people in an office, physical office. This is before I went virtual. And that just wasn't working for me. So I said, stuff this, I'm going to practice what I preach. And I did exactly what my customers were doing. I brought out the first in my series of books. I profiled myself as the expert in their field. I launched as the publishing queen, and everything changed from that point in time. It was a matter of months before the office was gone and we moved to a virtual office. Everyone went home, changed from staff to subbies. We could grow and be global. I started traveling Australia, running seminars, workshops. The sky was the limit there, but it was a huge turning point. One, getting from the initial you don't need to have any capital necessarily to start your business, getting from the initial, oh, hold on, but you don't need to know how to do it, you can't do that, no, I'll work it out on the way, through to, hold on, you've done it for someone else, but do you believe enough in yourself to do it for you?
Right.
So,
Couple things real quick before we dig into each one of those sections, folks. If you haven't guessed, Kylie's from Australia, and you're going to hear some what I'll call Australianisms like subbies. What I know some people from Australia, and the first time I heard the word brekkie, I'm like, what? You know, somebody said, "Hey, why don't you come to brekkie with us tomorrow?" And I went, "What the heck is brekkie?" And I breakfast, and it was at that point I realized that there's must be a sub language in Australia that just shortens every single word and adds e onto the end of it,
yeah, yeah,
and you
there
kind of
is.
have to understand exactly exactly what the root of that
My
word is.
apologies.
So so
Subcontractors.
I was going to say, so I got subcontractors, but I'm just trying to give our listeners an Australian to English dictionary, or an English to English dictionary, as some people would say. So if you hear anything in an E on the end, it's probably just a shortened version of what you naturally think is longer. But, if you have any questions, you can feel free to comment on the video below, or send us the questions here at BCN TV at Expert Showcase, and we'll be happy to provide a translation for you. But so Kylie, it sounds like you've had an epic journey. Let's dig into each of those pieces individually. Let's start off with the
No
beginning.
problem.
And the interesting part is, it sounds like during the beginning, I think you said you were actually working for a company and you were doing so well that they thought they needed to fire you because you wouldn't accept a new job that they were going to be offering you.
Yeah.
Did I hear that right?
You did hear that right. It doesn't make much sense to the average person. It didn't make much sense to me at the time either. At that point in time, I'd run a series of businesses at a young age unofficially. I'd worked very hard for various people coming up from a background of where you worked hard for your money. That's how it worked. So I'd actually never been employed in a day in my life. And I prided myself on this fact. I'd always talked about it, how, quit several jobs, but I'd never been fired, and they knew that. The job they actually offered me, even though they told me I could run their business better than them, even though they told me, by the way, this was a small company, I was their only graphic designer, they had one sales rep, and they were the partnership, the couple that was running it. And they basically wanted me to do their job. And I'm like, well, you got one sales rep, you got one graphic designer, like I'm doing your job. But they were going to call it admin. In other words, they were going to pay me half the rate of a graphic designer to basically manage their business. So they knew I would never accept a pay cut. They wanted to start part-time. They knew I'd never want to go from full-time to part-time. But they also knew, because I mentioned about, little kid, big head, oh, yeah, I've never been employed a day in my life. I'm so hireable, At one stage, I actually had 200 job offers come in the same day. Like, I really had a big head, just to be honest with you, know where I've come from. So, yeah, that's what they said to me. They said, we know you would never accept this unless you were unemployed, so you're no longer working for us as a graphic designer. Would you like the admin job?
Okay, so that really was, and that's part of what I was getting at, is because sometimes in business, we as business owners and entrepreneurs, sometimes our rationale makes sense to us, but it doesn't make sense to anybody else. And sometimes,
Yeah.
Our clients' rationale makes sense to them, but it doesn't make sense to us or anybody else. So in their mind, they really thought that, it sounds like, if I can translate for a second, it sounds like they really thought that once they fired you, you weren't going to be able to find a job, and that they were going to kind of almost
Exactly.
force you into accepting this other position and be able to cut your pay and give you different and more responsibilities. Kind of like what clients do. Kind of interestingly enough, probably kind of like what even some book publishing clients of yours do, and clients
Oh,
of
people do it all the time. Yeah. Can I
where
get more out of you for less money?
well, and they put you in a situation where, and I guess that's the point I'm really trying to bring out about your beginning, is you were put in a situation where the person you were dealing with really felt that they were putting you in a situation that they had control. And what you did was
Mm.
you stood your ground and you said, "No, I don't, I don't think so. That's fine. You can, I'll quit, or you can fire me, or what have you. And I'm just going to go do something better." I mean, is that a good characterization?
Yeah, it's a really good summary.
Cool. And that, like I said, that kind of. So do you think that lesson applies also in business? Like when a client comes to you and, I'll say
Totally.
maybe tries to lowball you or something like that.
Yeah, totally. But both ways. Like indirectly, they tried to fire me. I quit, but I could say I fired my boss. People say that all the time. They fire their boss, they open their own business. You can fire your clients as well. If you don't like the way they are treating you, and it happens to me actually quite a lot because as I grow and develop my business, I'm going a different direction. I've got clients that are pushing me a direction I don't want to go. So you have the choice. And you don't have to be mean or cruel about it, but you can say things like, oh, sorry, we don't do that kind of work anymore, or I've actually got such and such to recommend you to that might be better to help you out with this. You don't have to take on the work you don't want to. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
And it's also don't, regardless of what situation you're in, financially or otherwise, do everything you can to prevent people from painting you into a corner and from really,
Yeah,
holding something over you, because once they do it once, you don't know what they're likely to do it again and again and again, right?
exactly. And if you
So
refer to it as you did, kind
go
of
ahead.
like pushing you into a corner, you've only got so many corners in the room. If you've got customers cornering you left, right, and centre, you can't service the rest of your customer base. So you need to be available. Like I now run, we'll get to that later, a fully virtual, fully automated business. Now that means I've got all my time up my sleeve to fill in what I want. If I want to fill it in with, for example, lead generation methods, or I want to fill it in with cross-promotional discussions, if I've got those kind of customers hanging around that want to fill it in with an hour phone call every day discussing what's going wrong in their life and how I can fix, that's not how I want to fill it in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And then you can choose and you can be flexible, because there might be times where you want to fill it in with hours upon hours of just trying to fix what's going on in other people's lives. And then there's times you want to fill it in with lead generation, where, like I know now, there's a number of face groups. Right now as we're recording this, I'm a little bit bigger into doing some help on Facebook. So I'm out on Facebook groups a
Yep.
long time during the day, just to help some people get ahead. And there's going to be times where I'm going to be completely non-existent doing that, because there'll be different things
Busy
going
with other
on.
things.
Yeah, exactly. So, what else from the beginning phase? And it's interesting. There's probably going to elongate the turning point, because you really had two turning points. The one was when you got fired,
Yeah.
because that's what switched you into a business, and the second one was it's kind of like the roller coaster that everybody rides. You had the one turning point that got you into the business, but then you found something in the business that was the most successful, and that helped you pivot again. But when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to the beginning, is there any other learning or anything else you took away from the beginning phase before you started your business that you
Yeah.
go ahead.
I think on a subconscious level, while I didn't let the lack of finance bother me, it was a turning point where I had to think about and say, well, how am I going to do this without money? How am I going to finance things? And as a result of that, once I launched as the publishing queen, it went into my training. Like I was teaching such as cash flow positive book publishing, where you got paid to market your business instead of paying to do so, turning marketing from a traditional business expense to a profit generating exercise. I was doing things like teaching pre-sale, so you didn't actually ever spend a cent on the publishing process. You funded your publishing process out of someone else's pocket. I think because that's where I started, I wanted to make sure that no one had a limitation when they were starting their journey.
Yeah, that
So
and
indirectly,
yeah, and that's an epic point to bring up. Just the fact of, and that's what I love about this, is the fact that you learned something right at that time at the beginning, right where you had to start making the change. And even though
yeah,
you did it on your own, you're not the type that, and we've talked a number of times, you're not the type, or don't seem like the type, to throw that back in people's faces. What you've done is, instead of judging people, instead of saying, "Look, I did it with no money, you can too." What you've done is you've come up with systems to say, "I did it with no money, but you don't have to. This is what I
yeah,
went through. Now I've come up with
exactly.
stuff to prevent you from having to go through." Is that correct?
Exactly. I believe strongly in the four E's: the easiest, most effective, most economical, and most efficient way of doing absolutely anything. If it doesn't meet my four E's, I don't do it. And as a result, I'm constantly improving everything I do and everything I teach so that people never have to go do things the slow, hard, expensive way to not get the results they want, basically.
Right. And you're such a low energy, calm type of person that sarcasm. There's my sarcastic comment for the day. But anyway, so let's go ahead and get into the turning point. And the first turning point, like I said, we might. I'm not sure how long this is going to go because you really had two, but let's focus on the first one. You already talked a little bit about it, but tell us a little bit more about that time where you started the business. I know you started the next day after you quit, but give us some of your learnings and kind of what you were going through at
Yep,
that
that's
point.
cool. I wanted to do it smart, but smart is generally not starting without a plan. So day one, I kind of tried to create a plan. And what I did was I rang the local, I think it was the government area at the time, and I said, is there any business courses going? I've opened a business today. I better train myself in how to run a business. I'm trained as a graphic designer. I don't know much about business. I mean, unofficially, I'd been running businesses since age 8, but that wasn't, within, officially through the tax department or anything like that. And they said, oh, yeah, there is an intake, but it started last week. And I went, oh, when's the next course? And it was ages ago. And I said, oh, sorry, ages to go. And I said, well, what does that mean? It says, oh, well, you can do the course and you'll be really qualified, but you can't open until you graduate. And I went, hold on, I can't open until I graduate. But I'm opening today. Like, I want to get trained. I can't wait to open my business. I've just quit my job. And they said, oh, well, would it be easier if you did the current course? And I said, well, yeah, I've only missed a week. I can catch up. How long's the course? And they said, well, it's only 6 weeks, but at the end of the 6 weeks, you have to present a 100-plus page business plan to a group of potential investors, and they're not going to invest in your business, but if they approve it, you get the stamp of approval, you're allowed to open. I said, so if I start today, I'm allowed to open in like 5 weeks' time. Well, no, that's not about 2 weeks till you can present. So I said, so if I start today, I'm allowed to open in like 2 months' time. And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, I can't do that. I said, well, can you put off charging people so long as the invoice is dated? Like, they're telling me all these ways to get around when to open. I'm like, you know what, let's just go with this. They said, well, can you come down here? I said, I can't come down here. I've just told you I've opened today. I need to do the work for the people I'm going to have as customers. They said, oh, well, what are we going to do about this? I said, do you offer it by correspondence? They said, no. I said, could you? They said, well, I suppose we've never done that before, and an institution that never offered correspondence, I was their first correspondence customer. I did have to go physically down to actually present for that last day, but I did the whole course via correspondence. So I did it at night time because I was running the business in the day. So I spent 8 hours a day working on my business. I spent 4 hours out on the streets. I literally went out door knocking. I knocked on people's doors with a flyer I'd created, a really simple flyer, because as I said, I thought I was going to do graphic design, not books. So, would you like your business cards or your printed marketing materials done? Things like that, opening specials. Spent 4 hours a day walking the streets and then came back with the work I got and spent 4 hours a day quoting and actually doing the jobs. The problem was in the space of about 2 weeks, I didn't have time to walk the streets. So the technique worked very, very well, such that by the time I had the physical office, which was about 12 months later, I was getting people calling up saying, oh, there was a young girl that walked in, I don't know, about 12 months ago, and she handed us a flyer. Look, we're not interested in business cards, but we've got a range of books that we've just lost our current supplier. Would you be able to print them? And by that stage, I was a print broker, so, it kind of flowed in really nicely. But once again, it was almost by accident. It's like things were set for me. I didn't choose my direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the one thing I guess I'll disagree with you a little bit about being by accident because one of the things that I do know from talking with you, and even our viewers should hear by your the way you talk today, is the fact that you're high energy and you're making things happen. And that's what people have to
Yes.
understand is when you're out making things happen. And for those of you, look, I hate cold calling and I hate walking door to door, so that's something I don't do. But I do my active business creation and other methods. So the whole point is if you're not a big door to door, don't use that as an excuse not to do something. But what Kylie is
Yeah, there's other
showing,
ways.
yeah, exactly. What Kylie is showing you is the fact that, you know, when you go out there and she's humble enough to say, look, it was just, it wasn't what I anticipated, but it was just laid out for me. But you did the work and you were out there and you put forth the effort to make good things happen. It might not have been what you originally thought was going to happen, which is okay. I mean, this is where you have to people have to understand that it's the process and the journey more than the destination they think they're going to get to. Because a lot of times, by
Yeah.
the time you take that journey, the destination is completely different. You might think you want to write a book on this, and it might end up being a book on that. And if you're settled on this,
Totally.
and nobody wants to buy this, but but everybody wants to buy that. Let's face it, you'd rather be selling that than this. So I think you made
Very important point.
Yeah, thank you. And I think as a lot of people say, you made your own luck during that time period. You also got to your second turning point, which is you were starting to be successful and you weren't tied to what you thought you were going to do. You saw all this work for books coming in. So kind of tell us a little bit about how that happened and what you learned from that.
Yeah, good point. I'll start with the learning. I learned an awful lot. And when I said it happened by accident, I hear your point 100%. But what I learned was to go with the flow. Like when that first customer came to me and asked me to do their book, it wasn't the kind of book I'd do now. But I was like, sure, I could do a book. But it looked great. Even though it wasn't my style of book, and I'm not going to tell you what it was because I don't want to insult the customer, it was a professional, high quality, good graphic design, well printed book. So I was also out networking by this stage, of course. And when people saw what I did, they said, look, I've got some books I wanted to bring out, but I want them that standard. So my second customer was actually a series of books. And she didn't even want to sell them anywhere. She didn't want to put them in bookstores. She didn't want an online business. All she wanted was she was a speaker and she wanted to sell the books afterwards when she spoke, as people do. So she was traveling the world and constantly calling me saying, can you ship some more books to this address, that address, so on and so forth. My third customer, I suppose, book 5, was someone who I met at a conference, because, by the way, I was out every weekend doing personal business development as well. Yeah, I was keen. I see your point. And she actually heard someone present from stage saying you need to publish a book while sitting next to me. And she turned to me, she goes, don't you do that? I'm like, yeah. And she goes, how much to do mine? And we did her book and her audio book. So not just ebooks, we did audio books then. From there, people go, oh, did you do such and such's? Got them on board. That was a local customer that actually came from a statewide customer when they heard I did such and such's book. Then we went national from there because they started recommending me to all their friends. So by the time we were to about book 12, as I said, and I started making changes in the business, we were national presence, which is why I started the tour, because I already had clients in every state of Australia.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And the interesting part is you put yourself in the this is what I really want our viewers to take away from this. You put yourself in the right situation to be able to succeed. Too many times I see
Exactly.
speakers, I see authors, I see entrepreneurs, they're holed up in their office or they're so focused on running their business and working inside of their business and they're not focused on working on their business and then they wonder why they don't get any more clients. They think that the word of mouth thing is going to be great, and to a point it is, and to a point even you had a lot of great results from word of mouth. But fact of the matter
You're
is,
right.
if you wouldn't have been sitting at that conference next to that person, they wouldn't have been able
Yeah.
to turn to you to say, "Hey, can you do this for me?" And on and on and on. So that's the other thing from hearing your story that I want people to really pick up. And the final thing, before I ask you if there's anything more you want to add in on the turning point, and then we go to the aftermath, is if you don't find yourself, if you're watching this and don't find yourself with the energetic, bubbly, effervescent personality that Kylee has, that's okay. Hire somebody like her. Meaning,
Yep.
meaning when you're doing the book,
Exactly.
hire Kylee or hire somebody, subcontract, get a friend, find your happiest, most bubbly friend, and just have them help you. Because even if you're the one doing the work and somebody else is out there at the conferences, you as a team can get and can make things successful. Just like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. I mean, Wozniak wanted to build computers, Jobs wanted to sell them. It was a match made in heaven. So before we go on to the aftermath, anything else you want to leave our viewers with about the turning point?
That's probably about it at that stage.
Okay, then let's go ahead and move into the aftermath. And this is the time after that second turning point, the aftermath after you started to realize that books were going to be either a minor or a major part. So take us back to the beginning. Did you realize at the beginning of the aftermath, after the turning point, did you realize how major of a player books were going to be in your future plans?
I did as soon as it started changing. Like I was planning, as I said, just doing business cards and stationery and printed marketing materials and things like that. And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen so fast that I did get a keen indicator. The most recent change of direction I've had, I guess, is the rebranding and adding the end marketing to my title. I don't think I saw that coming. Like I was very clear it was books, but it wasn't until um, even a long time after, like that second turning point where I relaunched myself as the publishing queen because I wanted to do what my successful customers were doing and follow in their footsteps so I could have the dream life, have work-life balance, not just help other people create it. I was very clear how books fitted in then, but I don't think I realized, even though the major difference was those who marketed and those didn't, how important marketing would become. Because, of course, a successfully published book, everyone wants one of those, and I've been doing this for years. I can give you that with my eyes closed. But a successfully marketed book, that's a lot harder because that's where the work comes in.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's interesting because one thing I want our viewers to really hone in on is Kylie's got this very high energy. And you would think that somebody with high energy is going to be going a million miles an hour and not see the nuances in their business. And the reason I bring that up is because we have a lot of people who watch this show who have high energy, because I'm a high energy guy, and like attracts like. So if you think that just because you're high energy, you can't see the nuances in your business, Kylie is a great example of exactly the opposite. There was this nuance in her business that she could realize what was going on and realize it was going to be a major part of her business, even though she was going a million miles an hour. I mean, is that a fair? Am I overstating, understating, or is that a fair statement?
No, it's a good statement. I like to think I work with both sides of the brain because they complement each other. I know people think they're very much left-sided or right-sided, but as you mentioned before, work to your strengths. It doesn't matter which side you have. If you're not naturally gifted with both, which, let's face it, not everyone is, hire someone on the other side. I happen to use both. I call it natural gifting because I don't think I planned it. But at the same time, I hire people in both because why would I want to do things I don't need to?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you use both sides because you work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So half your brain works 12 hours. Half your brain works 12 hours.
And
The
the
other
other
half
way.
works the other
Yep,
12 hours, right? That's how you
yep,
sleep.
totally.
You just
Totally. Oh,
shut half
sleep.
of your brain
Where do
off.
I fit sleep in? No, it's funny you say that because, as I said, I now run a fully automated business, which actually means I don't ever need to work. And I actually set that up just as a side point because I've got a couple of kids, had my second child, and went, well, one child you can work part-time, but two children, you really have to be a stay-at-home mum. And it drove me insane. As you can hear, I am so driven. I couldn't be a stay-at-home mum. So I had to fill up this space, this free space, because I had a fully virtual business with things to do. And as you know, my current calendar, I've been pretty successful at doing that because I just get bored sitting still. I have to be actively doing things. So it's a really interesting point.
Yeah, definitely. And the interesting thing you brought up about marketing and not really knowing how marketing would fit into us. Tell us a little bit about how, what was going on in the business, how you discovered the fact of marketing being such an integral part of making a book successful.
Well, initially it was that turning point because I noticed the distinction, which is why I started doing it. But I didn't realize how important the role would be. I mean, I was always marketing my business, but I started marketing myself the same way I was marketing my customers. And as I said, I started my national tours. I went around Australia. I was running seminars and retreats and boot camps, and I call them boot camps because I'd literally kick people up the behind if they weren't doing what I told them to. Things like that. But once again, I had a huge fan following. I had a lot of referral marketing coming through. So I guess I was sort of taking marketing for granted just because it was naturally working so well for me. But then I did take a time off when I actually stopped to have my first son, or first child. He happened to be my son. And that period where just towards the end of your pregnancy, where you're a little bit big and it's hard to physically get around and be as active as you were, and when you've just had a child and you're literally breastfeeding every hour, and a few things had to change. And so, of course, I slowed down. And then I realized, oh, hold on. This marketing I've been teaching everyone, you don't want to be marketing when you're desperate. You want to be marketing so you're never desperate. Well, I didn't get desperate or anything like that, but I took a 4-month period off, and when I came back, I went, ooh, I haven't been marketing for 4 months. And I think that's when it hit me of how important it was because I was teaching it to other people. And as I said, I went the reverse way around. I didn't do it and then teach it. I actually taught it and then did it because I was working with my customers first. And I know that's a little unusual. But even though I taught it and we learn 95% of what we teach, I obviously missed 5% when applying it to myself.
Well, and I
So that was
think,
probably another turning point for you.
yeah, and I think what is so interesting is that I think a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners and coaches and consultants specifically fall into this trap. We do things for other people or we help other people do things. And we do them so easily, or it comes naturally, or it comes natural for us to do it for other people, that we forget to do them for ourselves. It's the old saying here in the States, physician, heal thyself. It's, some of the, I'll see it on Facebook all the time. Some people who are great at writing copy for other people sit down and go, help, I can't write copy for myself, but I can write it for other
Yeah.
people. And there's this weird mental block that comes in that you can do things easily for other people. And this is a whole another show. Maybe I'll have you back on. We can just kind of talk about this because it sounds like you might know a little bit about this too. There's this weird mental block that happens when people do stuff for themselves that they can find easy
Yeah.
to do for other people. And it's good that you took the time, you slowed down and said, okay, how can I apply this? And to have the courage to apply what you were doing for other people for yourself. Because I think that's what a lot of people lack as well, is the fact that it takes a lot of courage, and as strange as this sounds, and this is the last point I'll say on this, as strange as it sounds, to do something for somebody else takes a lot less courage than to do it for yourself. And that's a whole
Totally.
nother topic. But do you agree with that?
I agree with you 100%. I'm all about another E, empowering people, but I find I spend so long empowering the people I work with, I don't always spend enough time empowering myself. So I hear you 100%.
Definitely. I think that's kind of a good place to wrap up the first half of our show today. Today we're talking with Kylee Ellis, and during the first half we've talked about her heroine's journey from doing marketing and graphic design to being fired only to be asked to have another job at the same place, into starting her own publishing and marketing empire and becoming the publishing queen, which I forget, is Australia still a colony of England? I mean, would the Queen have any?
Oh, that's always debatable.
Is
Officially, yes, but I don't think anyone here acknowledges that with Australia Day just being the other day.
I was going to say, I didn't want to offend you, but is the Queen upset at all that you're also a queen? I mean, is that causing any?
I'll tell you what. I don't think I've offended her, but there is a guy, and I won't name names, and he's closer to you in the US, and I've definitely offended him. Definitely offended him. He is my biggest referrer. Won't name names, but he regularly writes blog posts about how terrible. Oh dear, matey, you better go. Mummy's on TV. This is my son I was talking about, who I was breastfeeding when I made the change to my direction, and he obviously hasn't got my message to say what time to get back yet. Hi, mate, you better pop out for a second. There you go. Just go down there, and I'm sure Daddy will talk to you. There you go. There's an instructor thing you weren't expecting there. He's a bit older now, as you can see. He's not breastfed anymore.
I was going to say, I thought we were going to take this show. This really looked like we were about to go way off. It would have been a viral video, but I think so. But anyway, yeah, we'll have to talk about that off air, because I don't know. I've had a few people in the publishing industry on Expert Showcase. He might have been a previous guest. I don't know, but which is always fun. So, folks, once again, you've been watching Kylee Ellis. We've been talking about her heroine's journey, and in the next segment of Expert Showcase, we're going to talk all about automating your marketing and generating prepaid clients. Stick around, come back in 30 seconds, and we'll be right back. Raise your hand if you could use more clients. Now keep those hands up if you know that the best, most efficient, most effective way to attract your ideal client is to create great client attracting content that connects with your ideal client and makes it easier for you to convert them into paying clients. Now, whether you have your hands up or have your hands down, I invite you to join me on the Create, Connect, and Convert Online Summit. It's where I and other people who are real-world practitioners of creating great client-attracting content are going to share our secrets with you. The summit is online. It runs Wednesday, April 13th through Saturday, April 23rd. You need to go out to the web address on your screen at this point, register to reserve your seat. And remember, you want to join us on the Create, Connect, and Convert Online Summit, because creating content is how you spread your message, reach more people, and make a bigger difference. To watch the rest of this epic episode now, click on the link below the video. Do it now, you'll be glad you did. Are you still here? What are you waiting for? Watch the rest of this epic episode now by clicking on the link below the video.